In D&D, there is a concept known as the action economy, which basically means whichever side of a conflict has more actions that they can perform, generally it means that they can win the conflict. This video isn't necessarily talking about D&D specifically, but more Pokemon tabletop. A few weeks ago, I mentioned about a fan who approached me at a convention and who had a long series of questions. One of those questions was about villains, and one of those questions was about handling GM versus player animosity, and her final question was about action economy, at least inside of a Pokemon game. Now, normal D&D has lots of different abilities in order to affect the action economy. You got color spray, entangling roots, hold person, a whole list of spells that can remove actions from players, either stopping their move actions, stopping their standard actions, or removing them from combat altogether. Sometimes you kill them, sometimes you don't, sometimes you put them under, basically in timeout under a time limit. There's lots and lots of ways in order to affect this. Pokemon really doesn't have this. Pokemon has there's a few ways to do this, but they're all really difficult to handle. Plus, players don't really like it when you start removing their actions, because as a GM, you're controlling let's say 5 NPCs during combat. Meanwhile, each of the players are controlling one. If you remove them from combat with a spell that just knocks them out for 10 rounds, they're going to be bored for an hour because they no longer have anything to do. This was actually a big problem in one of my GM for hires. I realized that we were playing a low-level campaign and I hit a player with color spray, which is an ability that can completely nullify. It basically knocks them out for 2 to 8 rounds, which is essentially in low-level campaigns, that's all of combat. This player paid a bunch of money in order to be in my game. There's probably only going to be one event of combat with a little bit of role-playing, and I just hit him with an ability that made them waste their money. I just knocked my microphone around a bit. This is a really difficult thing to balance because players want to manipulate the action economy as much as possible, but the GM also doesn't want to not mess with it a little bit. And with Pokemon, it's a completely different animal. So let's move on to Pokemon a bit. There's essentially a few things that affect the action economy. There's paralysis, which sometimes nullifies their entire action. There's sleep, which completely nullifies an action. And essentially there are entangling effects and other things. Most of these moves are very difficult to hit with, but with the Pokemon action economy, there's one or two really big differences. With Pokemon, at least in PTU and PTA, there are at least 2 characters that you control at any given point. Now, when it comes to wild encounters, the players will almost always win in the action economy because they have their trainer and they have their Pokemon. If you have a trainer that can fight, that completely swings everything around, because essentially you have 2 combat viable characters. If you have a capture specialist, you are going to have very few problems, because a capture specialist is a character that can completely remove a character off the board with a single dice roll. Wild encounters in Pokemon, at least with the action economy, you don't need to worry about. What gets stressful and difficult is when you have street brawls, trainer v trainer battles, and I don't have a good answer for this. Essentially speaking, when it comes to it, the action economy problem is really big in Pokemon Tabletop, and the rare AoE moves that can affect multiple characters at once can completely swing the tide of battle, and it's almost a really broken, really bad system, and I don't have a good answer for it. Essentially speaking, and the best I can say as a GM is, if you're doing a wild encounter where the players are just kind of attacking they're being attacked by wandering monsters, if they're going to steamroll, let them steamroll. In fact, they probably should do that. If they're fighting regular everyday trainers, each individual trainer should probably have 1 Pokemon each, because if you give wild trainers that would attack you, if you give them 6 Pokemon, the battle's going to go on for years. And if they're fighting bosses, same problem. This is not an easy solution, but the best thing that I've found as far as this goes is just let the dice fall, man. You can build encounters as best you can, but a lucky dice roll will swing the entire fight in terms of Pokemon action economy. Especially since in Pokemon Tabletop, a natural 20 not only crits, but then, like, knocks them, it, like, paralyzes, stuns, and or flinches, it's kind of game over for that particular person.